All right, welcome back. So next, we're going to talk about drop-down menus. Bootstrap gives us a relatively easy way of making drop-downs using buttons or links, and they look like this. Let me show you an example. Here we go. So you have a button, you click on the button, and you get a list of links that you can click on. Or you can take a link, this is actually a link here from an anchor tag, and make it look like a button and turn it into a drop-down. So here's how we do it. We make a div class equal to drop-down. Then we have a button, and then we have a second element, which is the actual menu of items. So the button is one item, and then we have this menu. And then you give the button data toggle of dropdown, and that turns it into the toggle for the dropdown menu. So let me just show you here. I have a new file, it's empty, or almost empty, and I will put a single button in there. And first I'm gonna wrap it in a dropdown. So we need that div with class dropdown. Then we'll do a button. In this button, let's do btn success, also just regular btn, and then dropdown toggle. And if we don't include that dropdown toggle, I'll show you what it looks like in just a moment. Put our text in here, like click me, something like that. And then second, after that, we can build the dropdown menu. So that's gonna be a div with class of dropdown menu, and then a bunch of anchor tags with a class of dropdown item. So this first one, let's say, is like home, about, and contact. I always use the same dumb names for our links, but that's fine. So right now, if we look at it, it doesn't really do anything. If I get rid of this dropdown toggle class, by the way, I just no longer have that little down arrow, a caret looking thing. So that's what dropdown toggle does. Now what I need to do is on the button, I give it that data toggle attribute we've seen and set that to drop down and save. And there we go. I now have a working drop down menu. So as I also show, you can change the colors, you can change the size. I'll show you the size in just a moment. You can also use an anchor tag if you prefer. I don't think it's worth me demonstrating that right now, but it's the exact same thing. You just change, instead of a button, you use an anchor tag. So we can do different colors, and I'll come back to split buttons in just a moment. We can also change the size, and to do that, you actually don't have to give size classes to every part of the dropdown. If we just go to our button, let's duplicate this one, so we have a second one, and make this one warning. What I can do is give it a class of btn large, and now we have a large dropdown. So we can also change where the menu itself appears. This is called a drop up. All that you do is, instead of drop down, which is what we have here, so let me duplicate this, we do drop up. And that's all you have to do. So you don't have to change it to drop up toggle or data toggle drop up. The generic term is drop down menu, but then to specify the direction, you can do drop up. We have drop left, like that, and drop right, like that. And just to make this one clearer, let me give it a little title that says drop up. And go back to that, and let's make it a danger one. All right, so other things we can do besides drop right and drop left, we can add in different items to the menu itself. So this is the basics where we have a link or buttons in there, but you can also do things like make an active class, make one of the links active or disable one of them. So we can just do active here, and you'll see that home is now listed or shown as active. We can make one disabled. You can change the alignment. So here is a right aligned drop down. See how it's flush on the right side versus the default looks like this, where it's on the left side. So you can change the alignment, and you can also add more content in there. So you can add in a drop-down header that looks like this, just copy and paste it. You give some element, usually a heading, a class of drop-down header. So I can do that here. And you'll see over here, we now have a header in our menu. You can add dividers, which is just a div with the class of dropdown dash divider. So if we make a second, let's just duplicate one of these dropdowns here and make this one have a header in it, but we'll also put the divider in it. And let's say, what would make sense to have after a divider? Maybe another anchor tag, but this one could be sign out or something. And then below we could have sign up, I don't know, sort of sign in actions could be on their own. So that's another thing we can do. You can put plain text in there. And of course, we can put forms in there. So I won't make you watch me type this from scratch, but there is nothing special about this form. It's just a form inside of a drop-down menu. So if we just copied the form part, if you look at it, there's no reference to drop-downs other than the labels and the IDs, but there's nothing that actually makes it a drop-down form. If I just looked at this form on its own in the container and I save, that's our form there. But if I put it inside of a drop-down menu, what's the best way for me to do this? Let's duplicate this drop-down again. And then inside of that menu, I'm going to get rid of most things and just paste the form in right inside of the drop-down menu class. And there we go. We have a form. So there's nothing special about putting a form in there. You just write your form code and it will be contained by that drop-down menu box. So this is looking really gross. All these, I'm going to quickly give them all some margin. All right, I updated things, added some margin just using margin Y3 on the dropdowns. I changed the names or the text of them, form dropdown, header/divider dropdown, drop up, and the colors just to make it clearer. Okay, so we saw that we could put a form in there, other content. The other thing I'll show you, what they call a split button. Where are you? Here we go. This allows you to have a regular button on the left side and then a drop down on the right side. And if you look at what it is, it's just a button group that contains a regular button and then a drop down, but it has a different styling, drop down dash toggle split. So I'm just gonna paste this in so you can see. Come down here again. I'll say this one is a split button. And if you take a look, there we go. So we have a regular button here and then the split here. And it's just a button group. So without the group, if we delete that div, where's that? Here. No, wait, this one. You can see it's just two buttons. One is a plain old button. The other is a drop down. Now it's acting kind of weird, but if you put them in a button group, take a look. It looks nice. It works well. One last thing I should mention while we're here is that obviously you can put drop downs wherever you want, including nav bars. There's one right there. So if you go to the navbar documentation, I think in their first example, yeah, here we go, they include a dropdown. So there's nothing special to make it a navbar dropdown. All that you really do is inside of your nav, so we have our navbar nav, where each thing is a nav item. You make a nav item, and you also give it class of dropdown. Then you do your A, which has the class of nav link, just like all the other A tags. And you give it dropdown toggle, which we've seen. You give it data toggle dropdown, and then you just put your dropdown menu in there. And there's nothing special other than that. So you do have to merge the markup a little bit, where you give your nav item also the class of dropdown, and your nav link the class of dropdown dash toggle. But otherwise, the markup is exactly the same as a regular dropdown. So what I've gone and done, if you want to see me implement it, I have a regular navbar that has no dropdown in it right now. Whoops. Take a look at it here. So I'll expand it. There's nothing in here. It's just some basic links. And then I have collapse set up, and that's it. So if I want to add my dropdown, I need to make another nav item, li nav item. And this one will be the actual dropdown itself. So we give this, it's the container, just like before when we used a div. So give it the class of dropdown. Then we need to add our anchor tag with the class of nav link. And this is also what we want the dropdown toggle to be. So this will be, I'll just say dropdown. And then we'll do dropdown dash toggle. And if we look at it right now, we should at least have, okay, so this will be our dropdown. Right now it doesn't work. So we come back and we need to add first, well, we can go two routes. First, I would add my div that has the class of dropdown menu. And then for each item in there, it's an anchor tag with dropdown item. So this first one could be, I don't know, let's say sign in, sign out. Let's do sign up and sign out. Something like that. And now the last thing we have to do is our data toggle equals dropdown and save. And we just pray that it all went right. there we go. We have a drop-down menu, and you'll see it is responsive. It still is a drop-down in here, even when it collapses at the extra small size. All right, so that's drop-downs. Kind of a lot to them, I know.